Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a much closer look, at the Manson family murders back in 1969.
Yeah, and look, if you think you already know this story inside out, well, maybe stick around.
Exactly. We're not just going over the same old ground here.
No, definitely not. We've spent, well, years digging through research, interviews, and what's surfaced are these new details, different perspectives.
Things that really add surprising layers of complexity. And honestly, a lot of unanswered questions about this whole infamous case.
That's right. And we know you want to get to the heart of things, understand the why and how beyond just the headlines. So we've waded through a lot of material.
What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, investigative reports that really dug deeper. Trial transcripts, firsthand accounts from people involved, law enforcement, folks in Hollywood back then even, interestingly, government documents that maybe put things in a different light. So the goal today is really to pull out those key insights, the things that might make you pause and think, I didn't know that. We want to keep it focused, digestible.
No information overload.
Exactly. We're trying to explore the less-known corners, the lingering mysteries of the Manson case, and sort of move beyond that standard narrative everyone knows.
Okay, let's dive in then. So what first kicked off this deeper look? It was an investigative journalist, right? Someone experienced.
Yeah, seasoned pro.
Yeah.
And they basically hit a wall trying to make the official helter-skelter story, from Vincent Bugliosi's book, fit with all the evidence they were finding. It just wasn't lining up neatly.
So right away, the accepted story had issues.
Right. And this wasn't some conspiracy theorist. This was someone really trying to make sense of the primary sources and finding gaps, inconsistencies.
And it wasn't just them.
No. This is maybe the most surprising part. Stephen K. Bugliosi's co-prosecutor on the actual case.
The guy who helped convict them.
That's the one. He apparently saw some handwritten notes from Bugliosi later on and was genuinely shocked. He felt they suggested, potential manipulation of evidence.
Wow. From the co-prosecutor.
Yeah. Kay is quoted saying something like, if Vince changed this, what else did he change? I mean, that tells you something, right?
It definitely does. It makes you realize this deeper investigation wasn't about trying to, excuse Manson or anything like that.
Not at all. The investigator makes that very clear. The goal was simply to understand what really happened, to get past the official story if it didn't hold up.
And tying into that, the atmosphere in Hollywood at the time, it sounds pretty strange.
What it was, there was this kind of troubling attitude among some people right after the murders, a sort of live freaky, die freaky vibe.
Blaming the victims.
In a way, yeah. Almost blaming their lifestyles for what happened. It suggests, maybe a lack of empathy or maybe just fear, a desire to distance themselves.
Chilling. And you mentioned Diane Ladd.
Right. Someone who knew Tate and Polanski moved in those circles. Apparently, she reacted really strongly against even discussing it. Didn't want her name near it. It paints a picture of intense fear, maybe wanting to avoid certain truths.
So this fear, this looking away, it pushed investigators maybe to look at other possibilities beyond just Manson.
Exactly. And one theory that emerged involved drug deals. Specifically, drug deals gone wrong at the Cielo Drive house.
Okay, how does that connect?
Well, a name comes up, Harris Pick Dawson. Apparently, he'd made threats against Wojciech Frykowski before the murders. So, there's a potential motive right there.
Pick Dawson. And wasn't there something written at the scene?
Yes. Susan Atkins wrote, "Pig on the door in blood." But one theory, maybe a bit speculative but interesting, is that it could have been meant to be Pick, maybe pointing towards Dawson.
That's quite a possibility.
And Dawson, along with a couple of others, Billy Doyle, Tom Harrigan, they were known as pretty aggressive guys. Apparently, they'd gate-crashed a party at Cielo Drive just months before the killings.
So not exactly friendly visitors.
No. It suggests a volatile connection to the people there and the place itself.
And there was something else missing from Bugliosi's book, right? Something about Polanski.
Yeah, this is curious. When Polanski flew back from London, right after the murders, he apparently had an unscheduled meeting with Detective Kotsanowski. At a Denny's, of all places.
A Denny's?
Yeah. And this meeting, this direct interaction right after he gets back, it's just not in helter-skelter.
Why leave that out? Makes you wonder what they talked about.
It really does. Was Bugliosi trying to downplay something? Avoid a certain angle? We don't know.
And speaking of the people involved, our picture of Sharon Tate changes a bit too, doesn't it?
It does. The media often painted one picture, but friends, people close to her, suggested things were more complicated. There were hints of marital problems.
Really?
And apparently, she wanted Abigail Folger and Frykowski to move out. She suspected they were dealing drugs from her house.
That definitely complicates the perfect Hollywood life narrative.
Absolutely. Even the stories about wild parties, orgies. Paul Silbert, a friend of Polanski's, flatly denied them. He said Polanski might have, played that up for his image, but it just wasn't happening.
Okay, so the standard picture is getting fuzzier. Who else is floating around the edges of this? You mentioned Billy Doyle again.
Right, Billy Doyle. His name keeps popping up.
Yeah.
And his connections are, well, murky. He was linked to this guy, Charles Taco.
Taco?
Yeah, former Marine, involved in drug dealing, but also had these rumors swirling around him about ties to military intelligence. Taco himself claimed he and Doyle were, quote, second-generation intelligence.
Second-generation intelligence. What's that supposed to mean?
Typically, it suggests, parents or close family also in the intelligence game, a deep connection.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it gets weirder. Taco apparently warned the investigator, basically told him to drop this line of inquiry. Said looking into these guys could be dangerous, even fatal.
Oh, direct threat.
Pretty much. And Taco claimed Bugliosi knew who they were, used fake names for them in Helter Skelter because he was afraid of U.S. intelligence. Said Bugliosi never even properly interviewed him or Doyle.
Wow. So, hidden players, maybe? Intelligence connections?
It certainly raises the possibility. And then there's another figure, Hank Fine.
Who was he?
Movie PR guy on the surface. But
Yeah.
his background, Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, during World War II. That was the forerunner to the CIA.
Okay.
And the actor Eddie Albert claimed Fine actually sent him on undercover missions back in the day. Fine's own daughter believed the PR job was just a cover. She backed up Taco's claim that Taco reported to her father.
So we're seeing these threads, connecting people around Manson, maybe even investigators, to intelligence operations, government research. It's unsettling. Could these connections have played some role, unintended or maybe even deliberate?
It's a huge question, and when the investigator tried to ask Billy Doyle about Hank Fine,
How did Doyle react?
apparently got very evasive, even threatening. Later, though, Doyle admitted something pretty significant.
What was that?
He admitted that his alibi for the night of the murders, supposedly making a pot movie in Jamaica with Taco, was bogus. It was a cover story.
A cover for what?
For intelligence work. Something about keeping Cuba out of Jamaica, preventing Cuban influence there.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So his alibi was actually an intelligence op.
Yeah,
That definitely makes you question what Doyle was really up to.
it really does.
Okay, let's switch gears back to the official motive for a second. Terry Melcher, the music producer.
Right. Bugliosi's core argument. Manson was furious because Melcher, who used to live at Cielo Drive, rejected his music. So, Manson supposedly sent the family there for revenge.
That's the story most people know.
But the research found things that don't quite fit. Contradictions, alternative accounts. For instance, Danny DiCarlo, one of the family members,
Yeah.
he claimed he saw Terry Melcher back at Spawn Ranch after the supposed rejection, even after the murders happened.
Wait, Melcher went back to the ranch after the killings? If he was the target or felt threatened?
Exactly. And apparently, Bugliosi left those specific details, Melcher's post-murder visits, out of DiCarlo's official testimony for the trial.
That feels like a pretty big omission. It definitely challenges the idea that Melcher was terrified and just cut all contact.
It does. And Rudy Altobelli, the guy who owned the Cielo Drive house, he was also reportedly surprised to see Melcher show up there after the murders. One account even says Melcher was wearing some of Frykowski's clothes.
Wearing the victim's clothes? That's bizarre.
It is. And it really clashes with the picture of someone paralyzed by fear. It's also notable that Melcher and Altobelli barely feature in the initial police reports. Makes you wonder about the early focus of the investigation.
Okay, another angle. Manson's parole officer, Roger Smith.
Yes, Roger Smith. Their relationship seems unusually close for a parole officer in his charge. Smith apparently called Manson Charlie, saw the family forming firsthand.
And legally, Smith had a lot of power over Manson, right? Could have sent him back to prison.
Absolutely. Anytime. Which makes their dynamic even more curious.
But Smith's background is where it gets really interesting, isn't it?
Yes. He was involved in a study, research on amphetamines and violence, focused on the Haight-Ashbury scene in San Francisco.
Okay, so.
Well, the funding for that study came from the National Institute of Mental Health, the NIMH.
And the significance of that is?
The NIMH was later revealed to have been used as a funding channel, a front, for the CIA's MKulture program.
MKulture. Right. That was the mind control stuff, wasn't it? LSD experiments, behavioral modification, often without people knowing.
That's the one. Highly controversial, obviously. Experiments on human subjects. So Smith's research had this funding link, however indirect, to MKulture.
And Manson and his followers spent time in the Haight-Ashbury?
They did. They were regulars at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. And adding another layer, a different Dr. Smith, and David Smith, no relation to Roger, was doing drug research there too.
Huh. And didn't Roger Smith's research files go missing?
They did. The files specifically on amphetamines and violence vanished mysteriously. What could have been in those files?
Good question. And there was something about Manson's own parole file, too.
Yeah, his complete file was apparently never released, not even during the death penalty phase of the trial, even though the defense subpoenaed it.
Why not?
Reports suggest the U.S. Attorney General at the time personally stepped in to block its release.
The Attorney General. What could possibly be in a parole file that required that level of intervention? It just fuels the speculation, doesn't it?
It really does. And it leads us straight into that whole shadowy area of M-Culture and these mind control theories.
Yeah, because there were people connected to M-Culture who also surface in relation to this case.
Yes. Dr. Louis Jolyon West, known as Jolly West,
Mm-hmm.
he did a lot of work on hypnosis, LSD, behavior mod. He even admitted inducing temporary insanity in lab settings.
Wow.
And Dr. West had documented links to the CIA's M-Culture program.
So given his work and the M-Culture context, people have theorized
That the Manson murders could be some kind of twisted outcome, maybe an experiment gone horribly wrong, a result of mind control techniques. It sounds wild, I know.
But when you consider the M-Culture history...
Right. And even Bugliosi himself seemed baffled. He wrote about trying to figure out how Manson turned these, seemingly docile followers into killers. He mentioned some intangible quality Manson might have picked up from others. Was he hinting at something like this?
It's a chilling thought. And West pops up elsewhere, too, doesn't he?
Yeah, oddly enough, he got involved with Jack Ruby after the JFK assassination, which just adds another layer of questions about his role in these really sensitive, highly debated moments in history.
So throughout this whole reinvestigation, trying to get to these alternative possibilities, what kind of cooperation did the investigator get?
Well, that's the thing. They ran into significant roadblocks trying to access official files.
Resistance.
Yeah, definite resistance from law enforcement. There was even a comment made about getting access to the LA Sheriff's Office archives being a huge no-no.
A huge no-no. That doesn't sound like transparency.
Not exactly. And it seems like this suppression of files, or this reluctance to share them, has continued. Various official bodies still seem to be holding relevant documents close.
Which leaves us where?
Well, it leaves us with a lot of those fundamental questions still hanging in the air. Why target complete strangers? Why that level of extreme violence from people, mostly with no real history of it, except maybe Atkins?
And the helter-skelter motive.
If that race war was the real driving force, like the prosecution claimed, why did the killing just stop? Why only those 2 nights in August? It doesn't quite track.
So this deep dive, it hasn't necessarily given us all the answers. Maybe we'll never get them all.
Probably not. But what it has done, I think, is shine a light on just how complex this case is, how many contradictions there are buried within that standard story everyone thinks they know.
It really drives home how important it is to think critically, doesn't it? To question official accounts, even ones that seem settled. That's something we always try to encourage here.
Absolutely. So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. We know government intelligence agencies have a documented history of, let's say, covert operations and sometimes strange experiments.
Like M-Culture.
Like M-Culture. Given that history and all these unanswered questions, these odd connections swirling around the Manson case, what other hidden influences might have been at play? Things operating just off stage, things that maybe played some unacknowledged part in what happened back in August '69.
It's definitely something to think about, considering the era, the context, and the information that might still be locked away.
Sobering thought, for sure.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It seems the search for understanding definitely continues.